Okay, it's 5 minutes past 3 Central European time, so I think we should be starting in order to stick to our plan for today's event. Hello, everybody. Once again, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, friends of the ocean. It's fantastic to have you with us. My name is Tymon Zieliński, and I'm a proud chair of the European Marine Board Communication Panel. And together with my colleagues from this panel, Angel Muniz and Fernanda Bayo, we will be taking care of this meeting today so that everything goes smoothly. It's the first edition of CommOCEAN online talks, and why we decided to give you this opportunity. Well, so far, the European Marine Board Communication Panel is responsible, in a good sense of the expression, for 6 editions of in-person conferences, CommOCEAN conferences, and the last one was held in Malaga in 2024, around this time of the year, a bit earlier. And during this conference, we heard quite a lot of complaints, in a sense, that each CommOCEAN is organized every 2 years. So as a panel in our steering group and within the panel, we discussed the possibility of organizing something in between, and we decided to give this opportunity for the online talks, because another in-person meeting would be too much of an effort for everybody. And this is the first edition, and we certainly hope that you're going to enjoy it. And we're sure that we have very interesting speakers, and we hope for really great discussions. During this meeting today, we would like to introduce some quick house rules. Please remain muted. It's automatically muted, but please remain muted. If you have questions to our speakers, we do not expect discussion after each presentation. There's a special slot at the end of the presentation block. Please post your questions into the chat room, and my colleague Fernanda will be making sure that all of them are registered, and we will be making the selection for the discussion. Of course, after the meeting, you can directly ask our speakers via email if you have any further questions or comments, because that's the purpose of communicating about ocean issues to the world, not to keep it to ourselves, of course. Once we complete our presentations, as I said, we'll have the block of questions and discussions with our presenters. And then in the last part of the meeting, we are going to share information about the 2026 CommOCEAN conference that will be held in Bergen next year. So you are all mostly welcome to join us there as well. And thank you for being with us here. So without withholding the interesting part of our event, I would like to move to the presentation and discussion part of the meeting, unless Angel or Fernanda, you have some extra technical or organizational comments that I potentially missed, but I hope nothing was missing. Okay, super. So once again, welcome to our meeting. We are super happy that you are with us. The European Marine Board Communication Panel is very excited to start this new path, and we're starting We have four presentations. The first one will be given by Marco Boccia from New York. Marco has worked in the field of ocean governance for almost 2 decades, and at the moment in New York at the United Nations, Marco leads the Dualos team on the regular process of global reporting and assessment of the state of the marine environment. It's a hugely long name, but it's an important position and important place to be at the moment. And he also serves as a deputy secretary of the General Assembly's ad hoc working group of the whole of the regular process. My God, that's a really long one, but again, an important position. So Marco is going to share information and issues connected to the World Ocean Assessment 3. So Marco, the floor is yours. You have 20 minutes, and I'm sure it's going to be super exciting.
Thank you, Timon. Just let me give me a second to share the screen again. Of course, only one issue. Apologies. What's the issue? Okay, here. Yep. Okay. Can you see the screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's if you could move it into the presentation mode. Yes,
Okay.
perfect.
Yes. Okay.
That's
Okay.
super.
Thank you, and well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Timon, for inviting me to make this presentation. And I think you already capture one of the messaging from this presentation, which is, of course, title. A good and catchy title is not the strength of the UN, as you know. As always, we always tend to have these complex, lengthy titles because often we have member states that tries to make sure that everything is in it, and this is why we end up with this lengthy title that you see in the slide. In brief, we just say regular process, but nevertheless, since that this talk is about communication, and I think this is one of the issues that we're encountering in this process, where it's not very friendly for dissemination when the title is so long. So I will definitely talk about this, and then the other presenter after me will be able to further elaborate on the importance of communication and in science policy interface. But maybe I would just like to use my time to introduce quickly this process and then the outputs, so that you can see, you'll be able to see what type of efforts we've been doing in trying to make sure that communication is improved, and also the deliverables for decision makers are well developed for them to be used. So I think I will structure the presentation in this way, and then of course we can take questions afterwards. So yeah, again, the title, as you can see, very long. We're currently in the fourth cycle, about to start the fourth cycle. So we're currently finishing the third cycle. Every cycle is 5 years. And you will hear all about it. In January, we'll start the fourth cycle from 2026 to 2030. So now, so I think just to I guess explain the evolution of this process and how it slowly get to reach where we are right now, primarily in terms of deliverables. As you can see from the slide, the idea of establishing such a process started back in 2002. At the World Summit on Sustainable Development, and then it resulted in a preparatory startup phase, which culminated with the production of the so-called assessment of assessment. And after that, the General Assembly decided to launch every cycle of this process in 5 years term. And with the first cycle being from 2010 to 2014, and the main output was back then just the first world ocean assessment. Then as we moved to the other cycle, as you can see, the deliverables increased every time. So the second cycle, 2016 to 2020, included the technical abstracts on WOA 2 and the actual second world ocean assessment. So as you can see, we're already moving with the technical abstract in the direction of trying to extract and communicate the highlights from this very large publication in smaller doses for people to use, particularly for decision makers, and then translate these in all UN languages. So this was the first step in that direction. And you will see then that in the third current cycle that ends in a few weeks, in December, 31st December, we do have other thematic summaries on the second assessment that I will briefly mention later. Then a capacity building program aimed at strengthening the science policy interface that I will also elaborate a bit more. Then the actual third world ocean assessment, which was just approved by the General Assembly recently, and it will be launched early next year. And then thematic summary on this last third assessment, which I will also briefly discuss. So when we move then to the next cycle, we have similar outputs than the current cycle. So we will have another fourth world ocean assessment. A main introduction when we talk about communication will be the digital platform. So the assessment will no longer be just printed in a very thick PDF, 1,000 pages, but actually it will be distributed in the form of a digital format. So this is to make sure that the information will be widely distributed, and highlights from this large publication can be extrapolated from the text easily by the users. So I will also talk briefly about that. And then another capacity building program always aimed at strengthening science policy interface, and then again thematic summaries. So as you can see, thematic summaries now are constant, are one of the main output, because we realize that of course the main publication is useful, but then nevertheless we still need to do custom tailored documents that can be used easily by decision maker, where they can find information. And for instance, the thematic summary that we're currently working on are on climate change and on marine biodiversity. So that means that the information contained in the assessment on these two topics are extrapolated and summarized in about 15 pages per segment, so that there are segments within this topic, and then these are presented for the policymakers. So this is just in a nutshell how the process changes. And as you can see, definitely communication is a leading element of this change, because investing, especially with this large investment that we're currently doing on the digital platform, we're trying to make sure that the information is easily accessed and can be easily shared with all relevant stakeholders. So I think this is just briefly on the governance structure for everyone knowledge. As I mentioned, this is a General Assembly process, so it's the only General Assembly process aimed at strengthening the science policy interface and in providing, therefore, a regular update on the state of the marine environment, including socioeconomic aspects. So I think it's important to know that within the very lengthy title that Timon was mentioning, indeed, there is also this important distinction of socioeconomic aspects, which is a very important data. So it's not just on the biological side, but also the socioeconomic. So you will see later how the third world ocean assessment was structured in this line. So in brief, I think I just wanted to know that the working group of the whole is the body where the member states are consulted for taking decisions, and Bureau takes decision in the intersessional period. But I think the main element of these slides is, of course, the group of experts, where actually Timon is currently been a member for quite some time. And these are the lead experts of this process, or of any output from this process. So of course we rely on them in producing any given output from this 5-year cycle process. Then there are new a short-term consultant to support the group of experts on the thematic coordination of this large publication. As you can imagine, it's very difficult to find a group of experts that can cover the whole complement of topics and headings of the ocean, given that the assessment indeed is a comprehensive and integrated assessment, so it covers really all sorts of aspects, not just one element. And I would say, in brief, I just want to share here because I don't want to bore you, but I would say that the Secretariat sits in the Division for Ocean Affairs Law of the Sea, which is the Secretariat also of the Law of the Sea Convention. And I think to finish, also in case people are interested to join in this process, of course, I'm more than happy to answer further questions. But anyone interested in participating in this process will need to be nominated to the so-called pool of experts. So this pool of experts is where we can select members of writing teams or peer reviewers for any given output of this process. So in case there is interest for those connected in this meeting, of course, I'm more than happy to further elaborate on how to join this process, but it's rather easy. It can be done by self-recommending yourself, and then we will have to bring your recommendation to your country for confirmation. So we will take care of that step. We just need an email from you with your interest and a CV, and then we'll contact your national authority to ask them if you can be included in this pool. So it's much easier than what it used to be. And again, I'm more than happy to provide more information, but I think it's just important just to show you where this process sits within the General Assembly and so on. And I guess talking about General Assembly, it's also the uniqueness of this process is that it is the only global integrated assessment of the state of the marine environment. So you may be familiar with other similar processes such as IPES and IPCC, which of course we collaborate and work with together. And we also share others in terms of collaborating in both processes, but they do more targeted and specific type of outputs, while this one is a more overarching output, which of course does include other relevant publication from processes like IPES and IPCC. So there is complementarity in a sense that we try to make sure that there is no duplication, of course, of work, but there's more complementarity. This is just a quick snapshot on the current membership of the group of experts. As you can see, we have 5 experts per regional group. We do have unfortunately, still 2 pending from Eastern European group. So for the next cycle, starting in January, we're hoping to have the full complement of 25 members. But just to show you the variety of the experts involved, you may know some of them. But then I think I just want to talk about the Third World Ocean Assessment and the digital platform in here. I think it will be important to note how this assessment has changed over the years. So while the first assessment was really the first time that the General Assembly did a base study on the state of the marine environment, the second assessment from the previous cycle was merely an update of that base study. So the expert of the cycle decided that the third assessment should not just be an update, but should also include new elements. So there is value in having update. And as you can see in section 4, there is a dedicated section on the update on the previous assessment. But nevertheless, it's also important to bring in new elements, cross-cutting themes like gender and traditional knowledge and governance. And then, of course, the different topics that were not properly covered in the previous assessment. For instance, for lack of experts involved or in the sense that we were not able to put together a concrete writing team. I always give the example of a very particular chapter, which is the one on desalinization, which, as you can imagine, is a very specific topic. So this time around, we were able to put together a very strong team, and therefore there will be, for the first time, a fully fledged chapter on desalinization, rather than having this topic covered, just submerged into another section. So just to give you an idea. Another new element that was introduced was on the importance of future scenarios, so forward-looking scenario, which is also new elements. So as you can see, it's quite different than a merely update from the base study, but we will see where the new expert will bring us with the next cycle. But nevertheless, I think it's interesting to see how this assessment is likely changing and adapting more to the request from member states. Because of course, at the end of the day, the structure of every assessment has to be approved by all member states of the United Nations. So it is on one hand proposed by the expert, but has to be approved by member states. So as you can see, again, these are some of the elements that I wanted to bring to your attention, particularly after the section 4, section 5, you have this new concept of sustainability pathways. So that's a very interesting new element that was introduced, as you can see, which focus on human activities in the ocean. And then, of course, we finish with One Health, which encompasses three main components: physical and chemical marine environment, the organism that live in the marine environment, and people. So I think with that, just to give you a description of how this main publication was changed. And then, of course, going to the thematic summaries, I think I mentioned currently undergoing to plan to be developed, finalized in the next few weeks, just before Christmas. One on marine biodiversity and one on climate change. So also these will be launched next year. And as you can see, the digital platform, I'm not able to provide any information because visual information, because it's still in the process of being developed. We're currently working with a partner, Grid Arendal. Some of you may know, they're helping us with structuring and putting in place this new digital platform that will host this third assessment and future assessment. And I think this is a main step towards strengthening really the communication of this process, because we're realizing, and I guess we will talk more about it throughout this segment with other speakers, that indeed it is a relatively new process compared to other similar processes like IPES and IPCC. So I think it's important that we make more efforts aimed at raising awareness of this process and of its very valuable outputs. And the digital platform goes in that direction. So we're very keen in launching this most likely early next year. The assessment is just been, as I mentioned, just after various rounds of review by member states, because it's reviewed and approved by member states. It was just concluded and finalized last week. So now the editors, the UN editors, so there is a version available online which is not edited, so it's a bit messy, but the editors are currently working, and once that one is edited, it will be transposed into the digital platform, which I mentioned will have visual elements, and also will be able to extract information directly from this large publication. So unfortunately, I can't say more than that, but just look out for this major improvement of this process. Then next, I think quickly I would like to talk about the actual outputs from the next cycle. And as you can see, of course, we do have the actual assessment, which includes regional workshops on the scoping of the assessment, which will be held next year. So that's 5 regional workshops, 1 per each region. Then we will have coordinating authors meeting and writing teams workshop. So there is a variety, a multitude of elements and options for us to raise awareness and communicate to the wider public what this process is doing. So I think when we're speaking about communication, we'll try to make an effort in investing these opportunities and trying to reach out the global community to raise awareness on this process. Actually, an output too, as you can see, is really dedicated on further enhancing the digital platform, which I mentioned. So we will be working on fine-tuning the one that we're currently working on for the next cycle, and make it even better. There might even be possibility of including AI, which is not something that, unfortunately, we're not able to do in this stage. I think member states are not ready to include that at the moment, but it's possible that within 4 years, 5 years from now, I think that will be a reality. And then, of course, so as you can see, the outreach and engagement strategy is really enshrined into one of the major output of this process, and is As I said, we're just striving to make efforts and in improving and make sure that the public community is aware of this of these efforts and of this process. So of course we also count on you, and of course again I'm more than happy to provide more information. Then when we go on the third output on the governmental processes, in here we're primarily talking about the thematic summaries that I mentioned, which are done in cooperation with these processes, and then interagency meetings where we meet with relevant partners like IPES, IPCC, UNEP, or FAO on specific topics, or we do joint events or side events at specific conferences, like for instance the latest UNOC, the United Nations Conference, or even COP, the Berlin event. And then, of course, there is capacity building, which is indeed a new element. It's primarily aimed at strengthening the science policy interface, so it provides lessons learned on how this connection between science policy makers should be established and should be strengthened, and then also includes an element on ocean governance. So these are normally 1 week regional workshops. And then as a result of that, there will be then a symposium presenting the outputs from these workshops. Last time, the symposium was held at IOC UNESCO, that is one of our main partner, and it was widely attended. So I think this is just to provide you again with the outputs, because I think that knowing the outputs is important to know what possibilities we have to further improve the communication strategy of this process, because these are the opportunities that we have that we should use. So I think that's what's important, just to make them notable to the group. So as you can see, the main when it comes down to output one, which of course is the assessment itself. This is just a description of the various activities. We start next year with these 5 regional workshops on the scoping of the assessment. Then there will be the development of the annotated outline based on the findings from these workshops. And then based on that, we will know, based on the annotated outline, we will know what type of expertise is needed. So we'll be able to start recruiting members for the writing teams. And then onwards towards the end of the cycle, with some meetings of the coordinating authors or writing teams workshops based on specific teams that will require additional work. And then, of course, there is at the end a multi-stage review process by peer reviewers, UN entities, and member states, which is a quite lengthy, but nevertheless a very important process. So I think, and of course, this presentation will be made available, so more information also provided therein. I think, again, on the outreach and engagement output, as you can see, dissemination of information is really our primary goal. And in the current cycle, we try to do that to different means. For the first time, we're able to establish our social media presence. So it took us some time, but nevertheless, we were able to do that, and as fastly growing. We were also able to do webinars with facilitators from different stakeholders. The last one we had Fabian Cousteau and Sylvia Earle, which most of you would know. So as you can see, these are some of the ideas, in addition to, as I said, the presentation of briefs and side events on the margin of conferences, and then the development of informational material. But mainly, I think we're really putting a lot of emphasis on this digital platform that we really think is going to change. It's going to be a game changer for this process when it comes down to communication, because as I said, this is a rather heavy publication because it's 60 chapters. It includes all areas of the ocean, of course, in as much a summarized possible way, but nevertheless, it's still 60 chapters. So we're talking about almost 300,000 words. So it's quite voluminous, and that therefore this digital platform we really believe is going to be a game changer, even more so than the thematic briefs, which are nevertheless still important. But we're really putting a lot of efforts and hope in this new step of the digital platform. So next, I think when we're talking about engagement with other processes, I think I mentioned that these are primarily related to the development of these thematic summaries. As you can see in the current cycle, we already developed 4 thematic briefs on the previous assessment, one on climate change, one on marine biodiversity, one on SDG 14, and one on the various decades, the UN decades. So these were very appreciated and welcome. Nevertheless, I think we struggle to make these documents even more concise than what they are. So we're hoping that with the current one that we're working on marine biodiversity and climate change, we're able to reach a better level of output in terms of communicating this complex information in a neat and clear format. So I think we're constantly improving and working. As I said, we're learning by doing, and lessons learned is really a main process, a main step for this process to grow. Then
Marco, excuse me, Marco,
yes.
5 more minutes. Is that
Yes,
okay?
I'm almost done. Thank you.
Super.
For the
Super.
reminder. I'm almost over. Then I just want to go over the last output on capacity building, which, as I mentioned, comprises regional workshops aimed at the strengthening of science policy interface. So these are workshops where we bring together policymakers and scientists that work with policymakers, where we provide best practices on how this important linkage should be strengthened, and then also share lessons learned from participants on how they're doing business in their own country. So this workshop will of course be also done together with an e-learning activity, which is done in partnership with the World Ocean Bank Ocean Governance section. So we're eager to start this collaboration with the World Bank next year for all these workshops. And I think, as I mentioned, then there will be a symposium which will discuss and summarize the outputs from these workshops, in addition to also discuss the actual scoping and priorities for the next assessment, which of course remains the main output of this process. So almost over. In terms of how to engage, of course, there's different possibilities. As you can see, the first one will be host or support one of the 5 regional workshops, or coordinating others meeting or writing teams meetings. So of course, this is more than appreciated. We will be covering the cost associated with the travel of all participants. So it's only a matter of getting a host for a room that can host this workshop. And we try to bring this workshop, of course, always in different places, because it's a global process. So we hope that this variety of destinations can be achieved for the importance of reaching different parts of the globe. Then, of course, and the nomination or recommendation of expert to join the pool of expert, which I mentioned is the only way for someone to be part of this process. It's very easy, and all the information also contained on the website. And then it's possible also to, once selected in the pool of experts, that expert will be able to be selected as a peer reviewer if it wants, or to attend other meetings and side events and discussions in the margin of other meetings where we will host specific events on this process. So I think I want to leave it here. Again, more information and links are provided in this presentation, which I understand will be made available by the organizers. And then, of course, I'm more than happy to take questions at the end. And with that, I think I'll leave it back to Timon. But I think I just wanted to finish by saying that the reason why I was giving this level of information is just because we're talking about communication. So I think it's important to see how this process is trying to adapt with the importance of communication. And I think member states are learning that this is indeed a very important, and the process itself, we're learning by doing. So just to show you how this process is slightly changing over time, and what type of improvements are being doing, and also what type of opportunities we have to do this communication and awareness raising campaign, which is really at the heart of the next cycle. So with that, I finish, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marco, for this super comprehensive description of the process. And I fully agree that it's being changed since the second process second cycle quite a lot, and I fully agree that the digital platform is going to be a game changer, also including the contacts with journalists, and this gives us the opportunity to talk about it with Javier Cruz, who is a physicist by education from the National Autonomous University of Mexico, but also he has been a science journalist for over 30 years in all the potential, all the means that you can think of, from print media, radio, TV, to the internet, and the full descriptions of our speakers, short bios are given on our website. So I'm not gonna read them to you, but Javier, the floor is yours, and I'm sure it's gonna be super interesting to listen to your presentation. So 20 minutes for you.
Thank you, Timon, very much, and thank everybody for asking me to talk about science journalism with you. I'm going to impose my screen on you so that I can do my presentation. I will switch to the full screen after a couple of slides. So the problem I'm going to talk about is how to communicate science from the oceans while still remaining as a journalist, while still doing journalism. There are difficulties associated with this, and I'm going to, I won't go through all of them. This is not science journalism course, of course, but I will highlight a couple of them with a couple of case examples. So let me start with some good news that were reported by the media, the medium Now This. This is a very short, engaging video. Here it goes.
If we do it over an extended period of time, for a few weeks to a couple of months, when the corals are experiencing a marine heat wave, we can actually start to lower the water temperature over the reef. So the idea of cloud brightening for the reef is that when clouds form, they can form with different brightnesses, and this depends on how many tiny little particles there are in the atmosphere. Each droplet needs a little particle of cloud condensation nuclei to condense around. And over the ocean, sometimes there's not very many. The air has very, very few. It's actually the light in the presence of the hot water that causes the coral to bleach. So by reducing just a small amount of light, about 6% or so of the average light over the summer, we can reduce about 50 to 60% of the bleaching stress on the corals. Our modelling shows that very clearly. If we don't have strong action on climate change, then cloud brightening can only help for a little while. Eventually, the effect that you can get from the clouds, it's limited, and it just becomes overwhelmed by climate change after a couple of decades. But if we do have really strong action on climate change, then the modelling shows that the cloud brightening is enough to stop the reef declining and to actually see it through this period while we reduce our carbon emissions.
There it goes. So a sloppy headline would go, Australia is just about to stop coral bleaching by simply shading it with seawater aerosols. Well, sounds fantastic. And this comes close to that. Shading the Great Barrier Reef may slow coral bleaching. A bit better. Okay. Let me contrast it now with some not as good news. And this will be a shorter clip. As soon as I can move on to here. Okay, I'm not going to play the whole of this, but...
On a beach vacation this summer? You going to the Caribbean? You think in crystal clear waters, perfect white sand beaches, the salty smell of a sea breeze. God, take me there. Let's go. Well, maybe not there, maybe not exactly there, because it's all going to look maybe quite a bit different this year, thanks to the biggest ever buildup, the worst it's ever been, of sargassum, this brown seaweed in the Caribbean. It is smashing records this summer. It is prickly, it is slimy, it is smelly, it is blanketing beaches, it is bad for tourism. Not to mention, it's basically suffocating the ocean there. It kills wildlife, it releases toxic gases. Are you getting the, like, this is not a pretty picture. The area we're talking about is huge. Look at all this. It stretches all the way from Mexico's east coast to Puerto Rico, down to the northern coast of South America, some of it even all the way up to the beaches of Florida. I want to bring in NBC News meteorologist Chase Kane, who's got more on this. Sargassum is a thing that happens fairly frequently, right? Like, it is not unfamiliar if you like to vacation in the Caribbean, but this year it is worse than it has been. Is that because of climate change? What's behind this?
Well, Hallie, first of all, I don't know if you've ever smelled this in person, but if you haven't, gross, stinky, those are an understatement. And yeah, climate change is really the working theory for scientists and researchers because they've only been tracking this with a lot of detail since 2011. So the thought is that because our oceans are record hot, our air is record hot, that's just essentially fuel, food for this seaweed, which is really a type of brown algae to grow much bigger than ever. And then you throw in some shifting wind patterns and you get these huge patches moving.
And then it goes on basically to say you can go to the Caribbean if you still want to, but buyers beware. And does a list of affectations and things like that. Okay, so let's take a closer look at these two clips, and you can find many more on the internet. It's a joy. So the first one, the main scientific message is that by reducing just a small amount of light, just about 6% or so of the average light over the summer, we can reduce 50 to 60% of the bleaching stress on the corals. The second one says that the thought is that because our oceans are record hot, our air is record hot, that is fuel food for the seaweed to grow much bigger than ever. So you have magnitude there, and you have a lot of, well, some technical terms and something that sounds sciencey. The problem, I remind you, is how to communicate science while still being a journalist. Okay, so if these are the main messages, that 6% less sunlight will give you 60% less bleaching stress, and the oceans and air are record hot, so this stuff will grow more than ever, what is the audience expected to do with these messages? What can the audience actually do? Well, apparently you have two choices. Either you trust or you believe, or you don't, but not much more than that. And then it would follow, you would think, that something like this should also be believed. Because why not? If we are doing journalism that turns our audience just to trust, then it's a choice. So, do we have journalism to solve the problem? Well, let me take you just for a few seconds, and please don't feel insulted, to the very basics of journalism, the 5 W's. What happened? Who made it happen? When did it happen? Where did it happen? But crucially, why did it happen? Which is the most difficult of them all, especially in science journalism. So a couple of observations regarding why. First of all, it's generally equivalent to the how. Why did it happen? How did it happen? You're either going to have a causal relationship or a description of a phenomenon. Second, science journalists tend to get the answer to why from scientists whom the audience is expected to believe. Some people will say, yeah, no problem with this. But we may have a problem here, we probably do, because it appeals to authority, and the appeal to authority is a fallacy. I know, I looked it up in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and it says that a fallacy is, among other things, a deceptively bad argument. I'm going to come back to this point shortly. But in particular, the fallacy of appeal to authority happens when a claim is supported by reference to an authority instead of offering reasons to support it. And what I'm suggesting to you is that a vast majority of the journalism you see in general, and the science journalism you see in particular, does exactly this. Appeals to authority much more than giving reasons to support the claims. So let's move then from journalism 101 to a graduate level journalism, something more sophisticated, And let's start with this rather silly but provocative question. Should reporters then not trust scientists? Well, really not, but not at face value, although they very often do. But yes, we should trust them under certain circumstances. And so let me appeal to authorities, Bill Kovach and Tom Rosenstiel, two very good journalists, but above all, very good authors of books about journalism. Here's Elements of Journalism. I highly recommend that you read it. And it says, among other things, it has sort of an operational definition of journalism, because the essence of it is a discipline of verification. So, should science journalists verify the science? This sounds to some even preposterous, but I'm going to show you that it is indeed possible. In a second book they wrote a bit later, which is why the photographs show them aged, called Blur, Kovach and Rosenstiel say that they identify the very problem I'm talking about. How will we decide, we the audience, decide what information to believe and what sources to trust? What is the future of truth, and how as citizens are we to discern it? Well, the question is if verification and trust, which seem to be at odds with each other, can be compatible within the exercise, the professional exercise of science journalism. So let me give you a Latin American perspective on this, to try to answer when, under which circumstances, is trust justified to communicate science. This is Karina Cortázar, a brilliant sociologist from Argentina. This is one of her books, Science Before the Public, which came out of her PhD research. And then she has this principle of transference, which I have accommodated, I have modified to read, if A, in this case, the public, has good reasons to believe that B, in this case, the epistemic authority, the source to the journalist, that B has good reasons to believe in P, which is a fact, a scientific fact, then A has good reasons to believe in P. Sounds very simple, but it is all centered in this small phrase, good reasons. Karina doesn't really go in depth into it, so we have tried to determine what exactly do we mean by good reasons while exercising science journalism. So let me get back to the oceans, to the first clip. The fact is this, this is the claim. By reducing just about 6% or so of the average light over the summer, with seawater aerosol particles being flown over the reef, we can reduce about 50 to 60% of the bleaching stress on the corals. It's an enormous thing to say. Just think about it for a second. So the source, in this case, the ocean scientist, has concluded that this fact, P, is believable. If challenged, and he will be, as he should be, he is expected to defend the path to that conclusion. This is if the challenge happens in a scientific gathering. What if it happens during a journalistic interview, for instance? How do you challenge this, and how do we interpret all these terms that I've put before you? Okay, etymology will help us a little bit here. Look up the history of the word to argue. It comes from Middle English, it has all that interpretations, but notice that it comes all the way back from Indo-European, to make clear. And the suffix meant denotes a means of or instrument for a specific action. So from these two things, I can define an argument as a means to make clear something. What exactly is that something? Well, beyond etymology, the contemporaneous interpretation of argument is that it is a coherent series of reasons. So a scientific argument would be a process that leads somebody to a set of conclusions from a set of premises, previous knowledge, hypotheses, presumably something more, intuition, serendipity, whatever, to arrive at something that is presumably new knowledge. In this light, then, a scientific argument is a means to make clear the rational path from premises and more to conclusions. And this is really, I'm going to argue, if you allow the pun, all that a science journalist really needs to get started. These are the good reasons. The good reasons are going to live within the scientific argument. So if that's what we're looking for, and following Kovac and Rosenstiel, who said that the essence of journalism is to verify as a discipline, we science journalists ought to verify the science at the level of the arguments by asking two very simple, very citizen-y, but indeed very journalistic questions. Why or how does P, the scientific fact, happen? And how do they, the sources, the scientists, know that P indeed happens and indeed happens the way they say it does? So this brings explanations and empirical evidence into the toolbox of science journalists as indispensable tools, by the way. So this is how we verify the science. Now, this is what we journalists are meant, or are, at least let me put it this way, capable of doing. We have developed a number of tools and strategies and techniques, which I really won't get into because they would take the time of a whole course, so I'm not doing it here, but they do exist and they have been used. But what about you? If you are the scientist, if you are the source, if you are the person, the ocean scientist involved with WOA3, the ocean assessment, well, if that's you, then first off, don't expect your arguments to be questioned. They will very rarely be. They will be, journalists will tend to go after what you say so that they can quote you. So enrich what you say. You can always plan ahead to make your good reasons clear. Remember that oceans are always complex systems, and not complex in the sense of difficult, but complex, I mean, in the sense of complex sciences. They have emerging properties. The whole is always greater than the sum of the parts. There is self-organization, a number of things that have been well studied and well described for complex systems. Chances are you're going to run into them even when you're talking about a stinky pile of sargassos in the Caribbean. So these are things that will help you keep in mind, will be good if you keep in mind when you prepare your interaction with journalists, and we will probably talk about those interactions later on. So if you are working on or you're going to be involved in the World Ocean Assessment number 3 and even 4, as we already saw from Marco, these are tips that probably will be good for you. Do expect the appeal to authority from journalists, and I'm not berating journalists. Their job is terribly difficult, and the conditions make it almost impossible. And this is why we see most of what we see. But as long as we're waiting to fix the ecosystem of journalism, you can do this. You can expect to be appealed to as an authority, but remember to display your good reasons for citizens, which is what will be best for everybody. So strategize to the benefit of the public. So remember that trust and belief have not worked. It has been argued that this is something that journalism should be based on. Well, this is what it's gotten us to. And it's not what journalism should pursue. We're not in the business of creating trust or belief in the public. We're in the business, following Kovac and Rosenstiel, of verifying the scientific arguments. And then, and I haven't talked about this, and I won't because I'm very close to the end, and then you have to wrap them up in narrative, a very good cogent narration to tell stories. Mariana in a minute will talk about that. So let's give rationality a fighting chance would be my last appeal to you. And Timon, I've made an effort to finish early, and I think I did manage. So I'm stopped.
Yes, perfect. Thank you very much. And you triggered me with aerosols because my entire scientific career is on aerosols. So that's an interesting experiment, but I would probably have some questions to that. Anyway, so perfect. Thank you. It was a very, very exciting presentation. Mariana, you were already mentioned and sort of introduced by Javier. We have Mariana Ruiz now, who is a biologist specializing in public communication of science with experience in designing, coordinating, and executing scientific outreach projects. And there is much more about Mariana, but you can read it on our webpage, and I'm sure on all of the social medias that Mariana is present at. So Mariana, the floor is yours with the case study.
Thank you. So I will share this. You can see it? I suppose that you can.
Not yet. Now, yes, but
Yes, okay.
if you could go to present. Yes, perfect.
I got to turn my camera off because I think that the internet isn't working well, but here it is. So I'm going to talk about a case study, as Javier says, and here it is. The Cuyutlán Lagoon between conservation and industrial growth. This is, well, at first I want to start to clarify that this work is still in progress. So what I will share with you today only represent a part of the ongoing work. So the photo that you can see the background, it's a small part of Cuyutlán Lagoon. So I went to, what is, I don't know what it's happening. Yeah. Well, first I would like to show you this. In this video, the actual president, the PhD Claudia Sheinbaum, announces the commitment of the new Manzanillo port in Cuyutlán Lagoon. So,
se hizo el anuncio del inicio de el nuevo puerto de Manzanillo en la bahía de Cuyutlán, en la laguna de Cuyutlán. Esto es algo.
So, sorry. So, in the following months, the newspaper discussed the importance of the port and the multiple economic and social development benefits that this new project would entail. The project takes place within the following context. The Mexico 2025 plan is a comprehensive strategy that seeks to transform the country's economy through industrialization, innovation, and social inclusion, with an investment of $277 billion, which means a lot of money to do this. And in this plan, the commitment 85 explains the investment designated by the government to modernizing the ports. So, to think about this and to try to visualize this better, I can show you a map. So the Manzanillo port is marked with a red dot, and the Cuyutlán Lagoon is in the yellow one line. So the distance between the Port of Manzanillo to the Cuyutlán Lagoon, it's about 15 kilometers, and they are connected to the ocean by the Tepalcates Canal. So they try to expand this to approach the canal, the Tepalcates Canal of the Tepalcates, and use this to the new Manzanillo port. So at this point, I knew that I need to tell a story, but a story needs characters and conflict, and all that I had, that's the news, and it's there and it's very clear. The port of Manzanillo will be expanded towards the lagoon, and that's all. But what happened when I show you the next slide, that is the importance of the Cuyutlán Lagoon. Cuyutlán Lagoon is the most important wetland in Colima and the fourth most important in the country. It provides protection to the coastlines from waves and regulates sediment transport, and contributes nutrients and organic material to the primary and secondary productive of the coastal zone. It's a Ramsar site. This means that it has an international importance, and it provides an habitat for aquatic birds. And also, it lies it's important for the value that generates for the people who live near the lagoon and are involved in the salt extraction and the local fishing, that there are the economy that moves the people who live in Cuyutlán. And last but not less important, it's a research and conservation center. So, do you remember that I told you something about the Mexico 2025 plan that involves the inversion to expand and modernize the ports? In other objectives about the national development plan, we have to protect and restore natural ecosystems, promotion their sustainable use through a humanistic, inclusive ecological policy. So, if, as you can see, this is the conflict, you know, what happened when we want to expand the port, but we need to conserve the ecosystems, and the problem is that it will happen anyway. So I have my first question, what I want to do. A journal is based on the principle of authority or a scientific argumentation. So the first idea could be to interview people who live around the lagoon, as well as researchers and authorities, to describe the problem or what is happening there. That I want to say that this isn't less important, but it can't be all the notice and it can be all the work, because we need to talk, like Javier was saying, about the arguments. So the other idea, the other way to do this is usually a bit more difficult, and it involves understand the arguments and work with them. So in June 2025, the government of Colima, together with the National Commission of Protected Areas, proposed the declaration of a new protected natural area. It's important to say that the protected natural areas are a tool that looks, the idea is that works to protect, conserve, and restore the ecosystems present in Mexico. So the proposal is to declare the Section 3 and 4 as a protected natural areas of the lagoon. Let's remember the map, but first there's the argument. Declaring the Cuyutlán Lagoon as a protected natural area guarantees the conservation of the ecosystem. As we remember in the map, Manzanillo Sport, the yellow dots are the sections of the lagoon: first section, second section, third section, and fourth section. The sections 1 and 2 will use as the Manzanillo Port, and the third and fourth will be the natural protected area. It's important to say that all of the modifications in the lagoon, they are artificial, and there are too many bridges that connect different areas from the port. Canal de Tepalcates is an artificial canal, and all of the lagoon is interconnected. So even these little spots, and you can see this in the zoom, this is it's a little connection between the second and the third sections, but it has a relevance. The research says that it has a relevance, this part, because all of the things happen here will affect to the third and the fourth sections from the lagoon. So at first, I think that I need to investigate the most relevant aspects from the lagoon, looking for those where science needs to be present. As it's like, why are mangroves important? Who is a protected natural area declared? There are success stories about this, all of these questions I had to research in different ways and different strategies. So at first, I take a look to the papers. This is a little bit difficult that we can do it. I do, as you know, I am a biologist, but now as a journalist, I don't have the same time to do the investigations like the journalist function. So I need to read a lot of papers, but I classified, and I think that a good way to do this quickly and with propose, it's to look from the abstract. And if the abstract can tell me or can argue something for these questions, I take it and I can look so the objectives, the introduction, and so many things that can help me to my investigation. So when the papers can't give me all the information that I need, or the papers give me the arguments, but not all about it, I need to go to the interviews. And yes, it's important to say that in the interviews, I have made two or three interviews from this work right now. It's important to say that this isn't the final part of the work. It's just only these interviews help me to understand the arguments and to verify the arguments. So for this, the PhD Sergio told me that it's not enough to declare it on paper or not to invite the lagoon. First, it is important to understand the ecosystem. One of the problems is that studies conducted around the lagoon to identify the biodiversity are done once a year, usually during the dry seasons, whereas to understand the ecosystem, sampling should be done two or four times a year. No? And another problem that they have is that they have studies specifically on crocodile and turtle population, where we observed how they underwent changes as a result of the opening of the Tepalcatez Canal. So they had the experience about how it's happening when you change or you modify something about the lagoon into the first or the second part, and it have consequences to the third and the fourth spaces, no? And he know it, and they are trying to work on it, but they don't have time, as another doctor told me, Abhikar Kapoor. He helps to make the Islas Marietas a natural protected area. So he told me that it took us almost 20 years to be able to declare the Marietas Islands as a protected natural area. 20 years comparated, because in November of 2024, the president tell us that they're going to expand the port, no? And it's about months that they have to research about it. And it's necessary to find and know which are the key species that exist in that ecosystem and investigate their ecological process over time to understand their importance. They have less than a year to understand the diversity within the lagoon before breeding begins. Once the work starts, there will be no turning back. No, it sounds horrible, it's terrible, but it's true. And this gave me the part that this, like I told you at the first time, this is not the work. This is not what I'm going to write. This is the information that I need to know how will be my story, my storytelling. So the conclusions about it is that it's possible to practice argument-based journalism. And I think my hypothesis is that this type of journalism could benefit the public, putting them in a better position to understand and make informed decisions. It's different, yes, and it's pretty little difficult, but I think that it have different ways to the people can take this new information. And in the other way, there are the arguments. So I want to share this because the arguments are in conflict. It is in the country's best interest to achieve economic growth. How we can do it? Expand the port of Manzanillo into the Cuyutlán Lagoon. The other way is it is in the country's best interest to preserve ecosystems. So the strategy is don't expand the port of Manzanillo to Cuyutlán Lagoon, but let's expand the port while declaring the Cuyutlán Lagoon as a natural protected area. I told you into the slide about how what I want to tell. It's like we need characters and we need the conflict. And the characters are the arguments that are in conflict, and there is the story. And like I told you before, this is a work that I'm still writing and I'm still working on it. So it's not finished yet. I will be able to share with you when I have finished. But I think that is a little idea that what happened, that what Javier told us, and what I think it's important to the people to know this way to make and to do journalism. And that's all. Thank you. If you have any questions, I think that in a few moments we can talk about it.
Thank you very much, Mariana. Very interesting story, and we're keeping our fingers crossed to the success of your argumentation. So the fourth presentation will be given by Kelle Moreau, who is a biologist and a member of the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences, where he combines activities as a marine biologist with those of a science communicator, spokesman, and press contact. And Kelle will be talking also about the case study. So Kelle, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Timon. First, start with sharing my screen. Should be appearing, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
I hope I'm not going to have too much technical issues. My laptop doesn't really like Zoom all too much, and to make matters worse, my camera doesn't seem to like me all too much. So I'm not
fingers crossed.
Try to touch too much. So the story I'm going to bring is going to combine a couple of things. Some of you present here in the audience may already have seen part of it last year in the physical CommOCEAN conference in Malaga in Spain, where there was a dedicated session where people could present experiences from communication or communication attempts during fieldwork. And as we were in the ocean atmosphere, we dedicated, or we put the focus in this session on communication on research vessels, but you can see this in a broad term, much broader than this, during fieldwork at sea, let's say. So there were experiences that I presented myself that will also briefly be introduced in this presentation, but I'm also including some conclusions that were brought to the audience by other participants in the session. That's the last item that is mentioned there, best practices from this dedicated CommOCEAN session. But I'm starting off with some general experiences that I have as a marine science communicator. As I said, I'm also a scientist myself, but I'm also trying to make sure that my fellow scientists that have never invested in communication themselves get some assistance and try to develop some experience in that. And the first slides will be mostly about that and about communication during different phases of a project, so some timing aspects. And one thing I noted is that actually, and that surprised me at the start, most of the requests that I'm getting from colleague scientists for communication, they are faced at the start of a project. I realize that more and more often communication objectives are being included in project proposals, or funders even require it. So this is one of the reasons, I guess, so that it is a project deliverable to bring the project to the attention of a broader audience. And of course, the fieldwork has not been done yet. There are no results yet. There are no analysis, no writing going on yet. So the scientists still have time to bring to me the material that we need to develop communications. The drawback is there is not that much to tell. So you're bringing the problem that you are going to focus your research on to the audience, but that's basically it. There are no results, there are no new insights. You cannot yet answer the question, what can we do? What can people do? It is all still to happen. So you are remaining with some kind of conceptual story. And also, there is no activity to show yet. And I think this is very important. You want to show real imagery, real footage from the field. And that's one of the examples that I'm showing there, a project. We are starting a project. All we have is some very nice infographics that are being made, but there's no real imagery yet. And some other kick-off that already says it all, or you're using stock images because there are no images yet. Or even worse, there is nothing that gets delivered and you're stuck with some logos to illustrate your story. That is not really a story yet. So the success depends very much on the subject, and some subjects are so sexy that you generate some attention there. And it obviously also depends very much on the tools and the audience. I'm not going to go very much into detail in the rest of this presentation into the range of tools that people can use. I will illustrate some things that we have done. And of course, the audience, that's also a bit of an open door. Depends on who you talk to, how you should try to reach them. And then the project is ongoing, and for many years, I don't hear anything. And then the project is finished, and then they are there again. So now we are finished. There is a deliverable that we need to communicate about the end of the project, but it's a very very busy phase because people are still writing the proposal writing the report. When it's going to be over, they have new tasks waiting. But the good thing is now you have results or insights and also the potential to show activity. If, and that's not always the case, the people involved in the project invested in generating material that allows you to show activity during the process, during the project, and often that appears to not have happened. Again, but that's the same as in the start phase. The success depends always a bit on the subject. Some things just work better than other things. That's unfortunate for people that are working on the topics that work not so well. That doesn't mean they're less important. And again, also the tools and the audiences are important. The example that we were giving there was a very difficult one because it's just a stakeholder engagement discussion. You never generate very nice material, visual material about this because it's people sitting in a room discussing. So that was not easy. But it sometimes works very well. So for instance, in this case, a 15-year project has ended. That's a quite long project. It's actually a continuous monitoring that still generates new images. That's something that worked very well. But what I want to focus on more is the phase in between. Try to exploit better the communication potential of the actual fieldwork, of the actual activity that scientists are doing. And in the ocean world, this works very much. I think you all will understand and agree that the working at the ocean is something very exotic to most people. Most people have no clue what's going on, have no way of imagining what is going on, and the research questions are often of very high societal relevance. So that's something that we should exploit better. But it's rarely a project deliverable to work to illustrate what's going on while it's going on. Scientists usually have little time, so I'm not getting a lot of communication requests during this phase. And the results that they are generating, and that's of course fact of science, they are still subject to uncertainty. So the certainty is usually only there at the end of the project when all the analysis have been done. And also the fact that scientists often need to publish their results before allowing it to be communicated is a problem for communication during a project. But the high potential is that you can show activity, that you can give the world some form of insight in the closed world of sciences at sea. Again, this imagery, the images that are being delivered to me are not always very useful, but we'll come back to that. And of course, talking about the success, if the goal of the presentation is of the communication is to show what's going on, then the subject of what is being researched becomes less decisive for the success. But of course, tools and audience, but that's basic theory for all communication, needs to be defined well and will impact the success. So some examples that you have seen there on communications where we did not have yet a lot of results, but we're showing some sexy activity at sea with new materials and new questions where it worked very well. In this context, of course, I need to refer to the problem that while scientists are busy at sea, they don't always have the time or the luxury to invest in communication, in developing communications, in gathering the imagery that might be needed for that. And that depends heavily also on the type of vessel that you're on. Sometimes you are very, very restricted in space and you cannot take extra people that could dedicate their time to this. But of course, that's why I'm coming to these last 2 points. Communication should be more seen as an essential part of a complete project planning, in which also the necessary personal effort that is needed to realize the production of these communications is an essential part, a central part that is foreseen in the project. Practical possibilities always remain problematic. And in this sense, I just want to refer, for those people that don't know it yet, this document, a future science brief on marine science communication in Europe, that was produced by the European Marine Board Communications Panel already a couple of years ago in 2022. The reference is in the presentation, where one of the main recommendations that came out of the analysis, and based on service and every. Okay, I see my camera is blocking, but you can still hear me. Yeah.
Yes, all good, all good.
That's important. So that indeed, and I'm going to the end of that quote there, that at least 10% of staff time of an institute should be the aspired goal for an institute to exploit the maximum communication potential of your activities. 10%, that's of course huge, not a lot. That it does not mean that 10% of the staff need to be communicators. It does not mean that each scientist needs to invest 10% of its time. It's an overall estimate, but that's what is needed, and the full potential. When we talk about the full communication potential, that is of course also very broad. That could include also visual developers and whatever people that are specialized in those type of things. It doesn't need to be everything, but the conclusion is we are very far away as an ocean community, an ocean science community, of that potential target. Now coming to the field, I talked already about there is a big range of type of platforms that we use to go out at sea. I'm only focusing on research vessels here, and of course they all have a big influence on what is or what is not possible. On the right side, we see very big vessels where number of staff is not maybe the issue. On the left-hand side, that becomes very different. Center below there we see the Ocean Explorer. Yeah, that's a vessel that is actually a research and media vessel, you should call it, that has dedicated spaces for media productions. Okay, that's not something that we can all make use of. So just to illustrate a bit the range of what we are talking about. I'm going to switch now to some experiences that I had myself, and that was on board of this vessel, the RV Belgica. So that's the Belgian federal research vessel. And in 2023, this vessel undertook a cruise, or an expedition, I should say, to Iceland and Greenland, where I was offered a place on board where I could just invest all my time in taking care of the communications. It was not part of the scientific team. It was not research I was involved in. I could just focus on communication. This, what I'm showing here, is the only communication we did prior to that experience. We could only communicate on what was going on our research vessel on social media, which was quite restricted, the communication. So because mostly the communicators are not present on board, so the material has to be delivered by the people that are on board. It requires that admins that are sitting at their desk at home need to be available full time during these cruises, especially when you want to keep the continuum in a series of communications ongoing, that you depend on scientists on board. Very often we have made very good agreements on what was going to be delivered, but in the end, not much was being delivered. And that, of course, you need to also establish guidelines for style and content. That requires also good and thorough communication with the.
It seems that we lost Kalle eventually.
Looks like it, yes. Should we give him a moment to rejoin us with his
Maybe
story?
to keep talking, and hopefully he will be back. Maybe we can have, if there's has been any questions, or you can also have time to think about questions from the previous speakers.
Fernanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see any questions in the chat room, unless you have some secret chat room with lots of questions.
Yes, I do. So there are actually 2 questions.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, let's start with one from Tekla. I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. From Plymouth Marine Laboratory. She's asking, or he's asking, I was wondering if there is perhaps any impact tracking from the World Ocean Assessment. Access to such information would be very useful for us as a research organization when we have to report or communicate on impact from initiatives where our research may have contributed. I think this one is for Marco.
Marco, are you with us? Yes, perfect.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the question. Yes, I think it goes without saying, we do try to keep track of how this work is used across the globe. One way to do that, of course, is through tracking our website and how many people and from where they access the document and what part of the document. So we have that information, and then also we have more hands-on type of information, which is actually through our workshops. When we do all these workshops, we also do surveys where we ask specifically whether any of these participants, well, first of all, were aware of this process, as I said, as a rather newish process as opposed to other existing processes, and then whether they heard or they used in some sort of capacity any of the outputs, so either the assessment or the thematic assessment. So this information is definitely helping us in gearing our efforts towards the region where is not as well as known. But of course, I think we will have a more comprehensive set of feedback with the digital platform because the digital platform will be able to track easily this sort of information. This is why we're also working in that direction. And then also every chapter of the next of this assessment that we're currently finalizing will have its own DOI. So of course it's going to be even more easier to track the specific chapter. So even which chapter is going to be most used. And this publication, I forgot to mention in my presentation, that will be done with Springer Nature. So we will have a digital platform made available in the UN website. And then there will be a digital, I cannot say the exact wording of how it's described, but it's some sort of active PDF with hyperlinks done with Springer Nature. So it will be published by them and share within their network. So that will be a way to really track with very precise information where the information is, what type of information is being taken and from where. So I think to respond, we do have some information, but we'll be able to have more exact information with this coming assessment, and then of course more so in the next assessment. So this is, I think, the direction we're moving to, is that we need to know this information, and the platform and having each chapter its own DOI, therefore it's easier to track, will allow this information to be as precise as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Fernanda, do we have other questions?
Yes, we have another one also for Marco. Okay, this one is from Angel, from EMB. One of the main feedback I get from scientists engaging with journalists and communicators is that they are not happy with the end result of the process, meaning awkward questions, demanding timelines, main message buried down, etc. While thinking about communication of science, how do you keep the balance, like making everyone happy? And specifically to Marco, do you fear that going to the digital platform would reduce the impact of the World Ocean Assessment for the main target audience? This is the UN member states delegations used to produce paperwork.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question. Well, I mean, no, I think it will improve in the sense that it is an agreed document, and it is. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a UN product, and it is negotiated not exactly the same way the IPCC negotiates its report. Is a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it has to undergo the process of review and approval by all member states of the General Assembly. So the platform, to the contrary, the platform will be able to really increase the reach of such a complex publication for the reason I explained before, because so far we've been only providing this very rich information in a static PDF of 260,000 words. So I mean, having a platform, it will allow users to reach the information in a much more friendly way, and even get summaries out of that in a very fast way. So it will be, in my view, even more so than the thematic summaries, because the thematic summary only limit to a few topics, but the platform will allow to produce to reach this information in the whole sector of such a vast document. So I think, to the contrary, I think we're working in the right direction. It's always difficult to find the right balance, because well, first, there is, in our specific case, there is the issue of word counts. So of course we cannot write 600,000 words. So of course, if you ask the authors, of course they would like each chapter to be double the size of what they have, but I think if we were to follow that approach, it would go against really the nature of this process, which is trying to inform policymakers. So I think the difficulty here is trying to create something that is meaningful, but is not endless in terms of words. So trying to be as concise as possible, which is indeed difficult. And we also realize that scientists themselves do not have this training because they publish in scientific journals, and this is not a scientific journal, so it's a very different exercise. Of course, for those that have been involved in the past, over time, they get the hand of it, so they're a little bit more aware, but it's very different because, in this case, you don't have just peer reviewers, but you have peer reviewers, and then states can come in and delete things or cancel changes because they're not happy with certain things, or maybe there is a political issues that they don't want the document to be mentioned. So it's a little bit different than the standard process for doing scientific publication. So I think every time we try to strive a balanced, delicate situation, also because this is it's not supposed to be policy prescriptive, so we cannot really impose recommendation on a document. This was the way the General Assembly established. So it's supposed to be a platform to provide information and then for states to take decisions. So of course, then there's a smart way to package the information in a way that is kind of written in a form of a recommendation, but it's not a recommendation. And some scientists are very good at that. So some others less, because maybe they don't have the experience, or maybe it's their first time dealing with this. Just to give you the gravity of the size of this process, we do have 60 coordinating authors, one for each chapter. We have 653 members of the writing team, so it's almost 700 people writing this document. So it's quite vast, and not everyone had the same experience, of course. Especially those that are doing this for the first time. So I think it's always difficult to find a balance, but nevertheless, we have to work with what we have. And I think every time things are getting a bit better, I would say. And I think going forward with the platform, and also with the new members of the group of experts, which is very strong for the next cycle, I'm confident at least that we'll be able to do even better than what we did, because every time, based on our lesson, we've been doing better. So it's just that as every large intergovernmental processes, this takes time, but I think we're going in the right direction. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have Kelle back. And actually, the next question I notice in the chat room is directed to Kelle.
Indeed.
I'm keeping the camera off. At what point did you lose me? Was it at the end of the presentation or during?
You were talking about your experience sailing to Iceland.
Well, I didn't get to the conclude because I only noticed that I got cut when I was, unsharing my screen.
Okay, so if you could recap about the Icelandic experience, that would be fantastic. There is already a question to you.
I was just going to my conclusions. So the thing was that during the cruise, of course, it allowed me to invest much more in communication, in much broader range of tools than sitting as a communicator on shore and depending on material that is delivered to me. So the basic conclusion was that also with the press, this worked very well in this case, because I was sending them video footage that I made myself and that they could use onshore for different types of communication. And in the end, I repeat basically the conclusions that you could feel coming already during the presentation. So that it's very important to plan very much ahead, make communication an essential part of the objectives of the fieldwork, which includes that you need to also create proper scripts in advance for all these type of things. So that's basically was the main conclusion. So let's go to the question.
Thank you very much. So Fernanda, do we have the question for Kelle in the chat room?
Sure.
Thank you.
So this one is from Anna Spitzer. Sorry if I mispronounce it. So she relates to Kel's presentation, as I am working on similar things. How do you see science comms evolving with social media use, such as TikTok, Instagram, Reels? Visuals are sometimes challenging as scientists most often use their phone. Some have good quality, others less. How did you tackle this? And lastly, would you be open to sharing your presentation?
Yes. The presentation will be shared. I will send an update because I've fiddled a little bit with the slides just before I started. I will send an update to Angel, and it will be made available also. So yeah, coming back to the social media, there is no fixed answer to questions about social media at a certain point in time, because these, as you all know, evolve continuously. But indeed, yeah, so the social media that we were using at the time of this experience, and that's only 2 years ago, was very limited. So we were basically only using the Facebook and the X accounts because the vessel has these accounts. We have left X in the meantime. We joined some new accounts. These have not been very busy in the last year, but that had to do with the inactivity period of the research vessel, so nothing to do with the social media themselves. But now we are moving more towards Instagram, which is more, of course, visual based, and visuals become even more important, but also LinkedIn for more corporate communication. To come back to the point about the quality of the material that is being brought, it is very disappointing. If people send me images that they have made, it is very disappointing indeed. When Instagram or smartphone-based users are targeted, then it is often good to have portrait style. But for a website, you need landscape style. So not everything that is sent is useful to use in the different formats. That's one problem. Another problem that I often notice is indeed, if the quality is bad from a quality perspective, then you will still use it, because I think it's more important to do something than not to do anything. And the people went through the effort of providing the material, but it depends still, of course, on the audience and the tools that you're going to use. What I also often find is that material cannot be used for a varying set of reasons. Sometimes it's because everybody is standing with the back against the people that are making the video, and you're not seeing what they're doing. You're seeing people, so sample is coming on board, you see people bending over the sample, and what you see is the back of some people that are bent over. Or that's something that also is becoming more and more important, and that's a pity. An action has been concluded, it was a big success, everybody's very happy, cheering on board, and then you see the footage on your laptop screen, ready to use it, and you notice that nobody is wearing the safety jacket. Something like that. Yeah, sorry, we cannot do that.
And the same cases.
So all these type of things, and that's why I'm really insisting you have to really talk this through very much with the people involved. And even when I was on board in this Iceland expedition, and that's one thing I was also mentioning in my conclusions that has probably not reached you yet. I mentioned that I was confronted with the word, what I call the word image conflict. I had to invest my time in writing texts and making sure that the images were there to accompany the text, but I underestimated how much time and effort is involved in generating the images, all again for a variety of reasons. Sometimes, first of all, you need to make sure that you are standing as a videographer in a spot where you're not endangering yourself, but also not endangering the activity or standing in the way of the scientists. So you need to really talk through with them and say, okay, the safe spot is there. But then it appears while you're filming that there you don't get a good view on the action. The weather can interfere. Many things can interfere. So often we had to do different takes to get to the good images. I was on board for 3 weeks. Every action was repeated, so that was not a problem. We managed to do it, but it took much more time than I thought. So yeah, some thoughts on this.
If I may continue on that, and maybe that would be a good question to Javier or Mariana, but also you, of course, Kelle. Jargon. What about jargon? Because we deal with jargon quite often, and sometimes I have a feeling that it's kind of exciting for readers or listeners to hear this weird language. But what's your opinion on that, Javier?
Yes, I'll get to that. May I say something short about what Kelle just said?
Of course.
Of the
Now we're in the discussion mode, so everything is allowable.
So yeah, allow me to discuss a bit. I understand the problem of having the scientists working with their backs to their camera. It sounds like a small question. It's not. And Kelly is very right in having discovered that you have to A, plan ahead, and B, invest a lot of time in trying to produce much more material than you will end up using, so that you can choose and you're not stuck with something that is just 6-7 to be contrary. So, but a very good solution to that is to not center all the stories all the time on people with names and surnames, and try to center the story. And I really hope that I didn't sound patronizing when I said this the first time. Center the stories on the conflict amongst arguments, which is what Mariana is trying to do with her own story. Because if that's what's happening, then you can film things even with backs to the camera that doesn't really matter that much if you see or you don't the facial expressions of the people. What you are going to be telling is what they are doing, as opposed to some other people are maybe doing, perhaps even on the same vessel. And what's the clash of ideas, to put it that way? And let me use that metaphor. And so this sort of eases the pressure on having picture perfect images, because you are seducing your audience with ideas at the core of arguments. And if there are scientific arguments, so much the better, because then pulling samples up to the vessel or measuring things with funny looking apparatus is part of the story and is something that you can incorporate. Again, I really don't want to sound patronizing. It's just a different way of communicating science through storytelling. Now, jargon always comes out of scientists whenever they talk. I am one. I studied physics. I can jargon people to death. But the thing with it is that, and I go back to the previous point, if you identify the conclusion you want to get to, and you identify, and if you can do this before meeting the journalist, so much better. If you can identify the good reasons that will get you to that conclusion, then you will probably be able to center more on the reasons than on the technical terms involved, because you're going to do without most of them, because it is ideas in the end that you're dealing with. Scientists thought something, and to reach the conclusion, and they had to answer. And you can answer it with jargon, certainly, but you can probably do it without as well. How do I know this thing that I say that I know? And why and how are these things happening? These are the stages where jargon is easiest to be put aside and to present the public with something in a language, another metaphor, that is going to be useful to them. And I close this remark by noting that I have mentioned metaphors twice. You have to be extremely careful with metaphors. Science is intrinsically metaphoric. There are works on this, and this is a fascinating thing to discuss. Nevertheless, a metaphor, especially in science communication, tends very often to be a lie that has been chosen supposedly to make life easier for the public. But science is not easy. It's certainly not always amusing. And if you really want to communicate science, if you want to make propaganda, then you go some other ways. This is not what we're talking about. If you really want to communicate science so that the public will comprehend what what you are arguing, then metaphors can be useful, but you have to be very thoughtful about how you use them. Otherwise, you end up with the immune system being a bunch of soldiers that sometimes go rogue, and you have autoimmune diseases, but you cannot court-martial anybody. And what the hell do you do with that? So it's never been clear to me. So these were my 20 cents on this subject.
Thank you very much. Mariana, would you like to chip in?
Yeah, it's just like I think that it's important that the interviews, there are not only the way to do this, and I think that to be involved to the prop level, whatever you want to communicate, you need to read a lot of it, and that's what you had when you find the papers. And I know that read a paper is difficult if you are not a scientific, because there are many like only scientifics can read the papers. So it's a different way, and you need to be prepared to do it. So Javier shared with us a way to read a paper. So first you can read the abstract. If in the abstract there are some information that you think that it can be an argument, you can go with it or just throw back, because you can lose a lot of time reading a lot of things, and when you finish you can say that I don't know what I'm reading this. It's too much interesting, but it isn't important to my story. So you need to have a method, a process, and then I use the interviews to understand the arguments from the papers, and that's so very easier than to have only the interview to support all my investigation and all my works. I don't know. I think that you need to find another kind of balance, so it can be able to work and finish properly your assignments.
Thank you. I will make it before we go for other questions. I'll make a comment to Anna about the safety jackets. It takes really quite a lot of observations. From my experience, somebody once filmed working team on board of our ship, taking out a more than half a ton CTD probe out of the water, and everything is perfectly okay. People are wearing helmets, gloves, safety jackets, and bare feet flip-flops. So going from top, everything is perfectly okay. It was summer, so it takes more than safety jackets, unfortunately. But this is really, on one hand, funny thing, but on the other hand, it shows how people actually work in such circumstances. So, okay, the floor is open for questions. So our participants are more than welcome to write the question or just raise hand and ask questions. Do we have any? Yes, Angel?
Maybe just to complement, because the question that I asked before to Marco was actually also to more or less to everybody. It's also maybe to ask the Javier, Mariana, and Kele, what is your opinion about to keeping this balance? Because from what I understand of the responses, that not everybody will be happy, and maybe that's not the purpose, to make the audience to get an interesting story, and then the scientists to be represented in that story. So yeah, it's just also sometimes it's conflicting, because, for instance, and I will make this question a little bit longer. We were contacted. You remember this story when there was the Ocean Gate, this kind of submarine, you can call it that way, that went to try to visit the Titanic, but then it disappeared, and people were saying like, okay, what happened to it? And then it turned out to be like rich people spending their money in that way. So there was a news entry who wanted to have a story of how this kind of private explorations can actually potentially help research, because of course they also made a comparison of investors going in, having their own space projects, and also maybe also with the deep sea. So this kind of like frontiers, private owned and so on. So then the scientists got these kind of questions instead of like, okay, what is the interest of the deep sea? Why we should care about the deep sea and so on. It was more like, do you think that, you know, philanthropies or these kind of rich people should invest in this kind of exploration? Do you think it will be useful for research? And it was like, yeah, it was not prepared to that kind of question. So when I got this expert for a feedback, said like, well, the questions were really awkward. So I was then suddenly really insecure on how I'm responding, because of course then everything is live, and then it's get everything on the internet afterwards and so on. So then trying to get scientists to involve on journalism or on media, while, you know, this person was also really good in talking and really bespoke and really well, but then having this kind of a bad experience, then, you know, pull her off to say, okay, this is not something I want to do. So I'm just wondering if also you have also experience on, you know, how to, yeah, prepare for this, or, you know, brief these people better before they actually reach the journal list, because yeah, sometimes it could be quite traumatic, if I can use that word.
Yeah, go ahead, Javier.
I do have some experience. I have been interviewed very few times. Fortunately, I'm not really that interesting, but I have done hundreds of interviews, many live and many on TV. And one thing I discovered is that you really lose the fear of either being interviewed or interviewing people once you understand everything is about control. But you cannot necessarily muscle your way into controlling the conversation, although many people try. But the more elegant and, importantly, the more useful way of doing it is that you fight for the use of the microphone in order to make a point. Now, if you are being interviewed, you're an oceanographer, and people come and ask you what's the point of Elon Musk throwing rockets into the air just to see if he can make more money because everybody knows he needs it. And then you're being asked an awkward question, and you are starting to sweat and feel nervous and bad generally, because you do not have control of that segment of the conversation, but you always have the possibility of returning the control where it belongs. If the question is off topic, and that's what makes it awkward, then you always have the right to say that this is not your area of expertise, or to say the magic words, I really don't know. You could even go as far as to say, I don't care, beside that, but I really don't know. This is not my field of research. You have to understand that it may make you feel comfortable, because you probably will be accused of being ignorant or whatever, but in today's environment, you'll be accused of anything anywhere. If you're on socials, you're going to be accused of something. So of being ignorant isn't the worst possible thing. But then you return control to the journalist. If the answer to the very convoluted off-topic question is, I don't know, then control has to be back on his side, because he or she is the one responsible for making the conversation roll. See? So if you think about interviews as a sort of field of battle, I'm making metaphors here, where the object of the fight is the use of the word, of the microphone, in order to make a point. If you are clear about which points you want to make and how to make them, then you can be in control most of the time. Once you think about interviews in that light, my experience is they become much lighter and much more enjoyable and productive, by the way.
Yeah, I think that the context it's important. When I start an interview, at first I try to talk with the researcher about what kind of interview it will be and what information I need from him or from her. So that's make easier than the person know that I don't want that you talk me about all of your life or whatever you want to talk to me. I need this information and I know that you have that information. So all of the interview will be around that idea. Sometimes I don't share the questions because I try that it for my work, for the kind of things that I do, I don't need that it will be on TV or radio or something like that. It's just an interview with two persons and I record it and that's all. But Javier told me something that it keeps I keep it on my mind when I do an interview, and it's important to understand that the research has the knowledge about the oceans or whatever you want to know, but you have the experience about to be a journalist, about to be a science communicator. And that make me so much confidence to know that I know that it's we are in different spaces, different of knowledge, but I need to have the control of this because we can be talking about 40 minutes and don't have any information for anything and about the life for whatever you want. So it's important to be confident. It's important to be prepared to study what you're going to ask. And it's real that you don't have to know everything about it because that's why you are doing an interview, but you need to be confident, I think, about it.
Yeah, I fully agree. Do we have some questions from our participants?
I could maybe add to this if you allow me.
Oh, you're with us.
But I'm keeping the camera off because when I touch something, I'm disappearing.
Good to have you with us.
No, I agree very much with what Javier and Mariana have been saying, and I can say indeed it depends also, well, very much on experience, of course. And so talking from the two sides, myself as a spokesperson, I'm often being interviewed, and as a communicator trying to speak for my colleagues that don't want to invest too much themselves, I pretend to be a journalist. So it's a bit both sides. And indeed, I see with my own growing experience that I become more confident being interviewed. And indeed, as Mariana said, it's a big difference if you're being interviewed in a secluded space for a written article, or it's live on the radio or for television. But I found that indeed, even if some nasty, unexpected questions can sometimes appear, especially when it's live, this is very unfortunate. But you learn to cope with it, and you're always in your own right to say, this is not my expertise, or this is not relevant to the reason why I'm here. So you don't always need to reply. And if it's about personal opinions, that's something I find very difficult, as sometimes you are communicating about something in a neutral way, but you may have a personal opinion. Deep sea mining, for instance, is something that we have colleagues working on right now. Objective science and personal opinions can be very different. You have to maintain the balance and say, this is not what I find is not relevant. This is what we need to know. This is what the agenda is. But that can be very different. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, but there's one more aspect of being a journalist or communicator or doing interviews. What's your opinion about being or appealing to emotional aspects of the story? Do you think as scientists we should be emotionless and just sell the story from the scientific perspective, or can we, I don't know, be emotional and just appeal to the emotions. What's your opinion?
It's a risky business, and it's a risky business in which very many people are engaged, because we have not really solved, from the journalism point of view, we have not really solved the problem, if it is a problem to be solved at all, of whether a journalist still needs to strive to be neutral and just present the facts, tell the story, or if a journalist working on the environmental crisis absolutely needs to be an activist as well. And then the purpose of your profession changes completely from telling an informative story in an engaging way with science content, if you're a science journalist, to trying to move people to do something, to stop doing something, to start thinking about something. And then the purpose of your profession is to induce behavior in your audience. And that's a very, very different and risky thing. People who are in this business, and I disclose it right now, I am not, but people who are in this activist journalist business tend to appeal to emotions a lot, because persuasion does work better with emotions and negative emotions and all that stuff. The problem is one problem, not the problem, but one problem is, how do you measure success? Because with the graph I showed you of the president of the US at the United Nations General Assembly saying this is a con job, we have utterly failed, apparently. He got elected with millions, tens of millions of votes. So we are not doing a very good job by moving people to action, by appealing to emotions. I do rescue one emotion, though, and I'll finish with this. It's something that I have called previously. I wrote a book chapter. It doesn't matter. I've called it the eureka emotion. It's this emotion you get, and we've been getting it ever since we were teenagers or even kids, when you finally get something that you've been struggling to understand. And that's very deeply emotional. And it's, I suppose, what keeps us in this business, because science is hard. But once you get over the hump and you get it, you get the emotion associated with this eureka moment. And that's the one I constantly try to pursue. It's not necessarily directed towards a change of action or towards moving the audience to do something. It's just moving the audience to comprehend what I have already understood, and to share this emotion of saying, I got it. And that's what science gives you. That's how science gives you joy very often. So I do concentrate on that one, and I recommend at least thinking about it.
Thank you. That's really nice. Yes. Somebody else would like to comment on that? Yes, Mariana.
You made me to remind, when I was studying my degree, one day I was looking at a test tube and I said something like, I feel like nothing is happening here. The doctor told me that you couldn't feel anything, because the science can't feel. You can't feel the science. You just, in the science, or it's happening or it isn't happening. But you can't feel that it's something happening. No. And it was like, okay, I can feel anything for science, but the science makes you feel things. Like Javier told us, the eureka emotion. But that, I think that as a communicator, you need to the people who read you, or the people to see you, can have that feeling. And it's difficult to separate it from the sensationalist and things that I don't know. I can see the Discovery Channel products as they have beautiful photos and dramatic scenes, like the polar bear eating a seal. No, and no, it's so sad. But that isn't science. That it's what happened in nature, but it isn't science. It is just what is happening, and it's a report. And yes, the idea is that you can feel it. No, the sad, or I don't know. But when you understand what's happening and why the polar bear eat the seal and blah blah blah, all the science behind that scene, and I think that there is the really interesting emotions that can happen.
Fully agree. Well, the time is passing really fast. It's 5:15 Central European time, so we reached the end of the discussion panel. Unless there's like one more question or comment that somebody would like to make. I don't see or hear any. Then I will share with you a slide that I just obtained from our colleagues from Norway about the. Okay, let's see. Can you see it in the presentation mode, or is it black? Because it's black on mine.
Yeah, it's black.
It's black. Interesting. One more. Oh, now it's okay?
Yeah.
Now it's okay. Perfect. So thank you for being with us, to all those who managed to stay to the end. 2026 CommOCEAN, it's the 7th edition that we are organizing together with the University of Bergen in Norway on September 1st to the 3rd. And as you can see, we already have the venue pictures that have been provided by our colleagues from Norway. It seems like there's also bar or something. I don't know, looks promising. And we have the Hakonshallen icebreaker in this very nice old building that will originate the whole conference, I believe. So everybody is more than welcome to join us on this in-person event in September in Bergen. But again, we fully understand that for some people this is not the right date, not the right place to go to because of whatever circumstances that are limiting us from traveling. So we are hoping that this online talks, CommOCEAN online talks, is a good initiative that is opening room for discussions beside the in-person CommOCEANs, and we hope that you enjoyed it very much. And for those who stayed with us, thank you so much, and hope to see you in Bergen. If not, we'll most likely continue with the online talks. Thanks to all the presenters on my screen. First it's Mariana, then Kelle, then Marco and Javier, and thank you Fernanda and Angel for supporting and helping. So we're closing the first edition of Online Talks. Thank you very much to all, and enjoy the rest of the day or the beginning of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.